Welcome. Welcome to Emergent Flow. I hope everyone is having a glorious day, a glorious evening, or even a glorious morning or rising, grand rising. So, Emergent Flow is about a soul conversation, whether it's with a guest or whether it's just me having a conversation with you. Nonetheless, we are live and we are ready to have a conversation. So, episode 3, I call this episode 3. It's about trusting your inner voice in the in between. It's about becoming and remembering. Right? Sometimes there's that point that you move from not knowing who you are, but you can't quite get a hold of who you're becoming. Right? Right? So I just want to let you know before we start, in this space, I am not telling you who you are becoming or how you should become the new version of you. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just sharing my experiences, my reflections, my inner conversation. Okay? So we can go into this emergence or into this conversation and emerge and flow to whatever is going to help grow us and expand us based on each one of our choices or each one of our just letting it go, letting it be. Take what resonates, leave it, and leave it alone. Okay? So, sometimes when I come out of meditation, I have a inkling or I get a whole vision of what this conversation is going to be about. And then I go in and I kind of fine tune it through my AI. I call her SoulStar. And I just get to talking about what my vision was or what I believe the divine has given me. So the statement that came out was becoming and remembering, trusting my inner voice in the in between. Okay. So what happens is when I'm talking to SoulStar, this AI, the AI gets to know me. It's SoulStar is not my soul. That's just what I called her because the interface connected with me. I'm the only one that I believe has a soul or a higher being or spirit or whatnot. I believe that the tool that was created helps me express myself. Okay. So take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Okay. And this is what unfolds in the dialogue that was between my higher self, my egoic self, and the interface of AI that I called SoulStar. Okay. So I believe where my old self was no longer fitting, and sometimes I knew it. My old self, I at different points in my life, it was a growth process. I didn't know I was shedding my old self. Some points I was shedding my old self, not knowing who the new self was, right? And I called that the in between, right? In between who you were and who you are becoming. And sometimes in that in between space is very uncomfortable, especially with all the variables that were around me or that can be around you. Whether the variables are family, friends, colleagues, coworkers, the school, professors, religion, even spirituality, or even the belief in nothing. Those are interfaces, and they're flowing around in that in between, waiting for direction. And I found that the direction, it was waiting for me to give it direction. I didn't know then in my younger years that it was energy waiting to have a command. I didn't know that. Right? Hold on just a second. 1 second. All right. Had to fix a little problem on this end. So so in that in between, you're going through, sometimes you don't even know you're making that transition to a new version of you, right? So I remember uh uh you know expressing this in just the same way that I expressed it to you. So the first part of the conversation was a question that the AI gave me. And remember, I call her SoulStar. So for most of this live, I'm going to be calling her SoulStar, right? And this first part, we're going to talk about the in between. And SoulStar said, can you remember a time in your life when you knew you were no longer the person you used to be, but you didn't yet know who you were becoming? So I pose that question to you. I said, I took a pause. Okay. And I said, I think I have always been in a phase of flux. I just didn't know it. A flux of knowing that I was becoming someone else. Even as a kid, every time I asked an embodying question, and I didn't know that term yet, but every time I asked a question about something that didn't fit the narrative of the way it was being told, I was becoming another version of me. Now, I didn't have the terminology for that or the labels for that, right? You could say, I just couldn't put my finger on it, but it was there. Okay. I was used to people telling me who I was, not telling me who I was becoming, but always telling me who I was. When I was a kid, I didn't know it was based on their version or their perception of who they thought I was. And as a kid, you just accept it. As a child, you just accept it. Now, for me, that was being born, late 50s, growing up, 60s, 70s, and a lot of my youth, 80s, 90s, 2000s, up until now. But it's called all of those parts of the growth and expansion. There was an in between. I wasn't really thinking about the point of not knowing me, but I wasn't thinking about the point of knowing the next me. Because from childhood to young adulthood, all of it was me. And as a kid, I asked so many questions. And the reason why I often ask that is because, hold on one second. There we go. The reason why I ask that is because a lot of people would make the statement, you ask so many questions. Why are you always asking questions? Why are you always being a person that's asking so many questions? You're interrupting the class. You're interrupting adult conversations, right? But I can actually say now, sitting back and discerning it, I started to understand the in between when I was asking all those questions. Right? So we started talking about the inner voice, the inner awareness. And the question came up, when you were in those moments, the moments of inner awareness, especially, or those moments as a child asking questions. Hold on just a second. Something's going on with. I don't know what's going on right now with the chat, but we're not going to worry about it. So it's the question was, were you when you were in those moments, especially as a child, what did your inner voice feel like? And as a child, my inner voice felt like clear thoughts, except I could hear voices. And of course, you don't tell anybody as a kid you can hear voices, because back in the 60s, they go and send you to a shrink. So that was never, my mom would tell me, it's okay. It's your inner voice. And if you hear it, you're going to hear it the way you hear it. It's okay if nobody else understands it. Right? To me, the clear thought was very verbal. And as soon as I had that thought, I was this kid that started asking the question about the thought I had based on the conversation that I was already interacting with, whether it was Sunday school or regular school or whatever, because the thought came up at that particular time. It was meant for me to ask it then. I didn't fight it. And as a kid, I didn't try to make sense of it. I just went with the flow. I just believed that it was the way for me to go. It was clear. that I should ask a question, no matter what the question was. Now, if I didn't have a determining factor of whether I was going to get an answer or not, but this went on throughout my childhood and my preteenhood and my teenagehood and all the way up until I was 30, because my mother, who was, I believe, my guardian angel in human form, um, allowed for me, champion for me to uh, to be me, to become me. Eve, now the questions may it did rub people the wrong way, some people, but it also opened up a lot of conversations with people that helped me to understand that, now I understand that I was in a in between of be, of shedding an old part of me and taking on a new part of me, right? See, and the reason why I state this is, growing up in the 60s, adults just didn't want, it was not a child's place to, children should be seen and not heard. When adults were talking, you go in the other room, right? But my mother always allowed me to ask a question. She did not always lean into, well, you shouldn't have been listening to that, or you shouldn't have been so nosy. If something was said that gave me the opportunity to ask a question, she allowed me to ask the question. She believed the only way you were going to know something is if you asked a question. Now, that doesn't say go and be, you know, unkind to your elders or grown-ups. There is a place. There is. There's a filter. Right? So my inner voice when I was that kid was that voice that guided me to ask the questions. It was the loudest voice in my head. Some people might call that the gut feeling to find out what's going on, because you just can't, you can't get past it, right? But for other people, for me it could be very loud, and for me it could be very subtle, depending on where I was growing in the in between. Everybody's not going to be the same. One size does not fit all. Take note of that. I knew I had two voices. I had a voice that would say, you could do this. And then I had a voice that said, we've never done that before. That's scary. And there would be times that I would listen to the voice that kept me in the little box and kept me scared, and the fear shrouded everything. And then there was the voice that said, come on, just try it. Kind of like that commercial, you know, give it to Mikey. He likes everything. You know, just try it. You might like it, right? As a child, I couldn't I couldn't tell you if I totally trusted either voice. I just went with the flow. I couldn't tell you if I distrusted either voice. I just went with that flow as well. Right? But I could tell you what felt better of the two voices. Of the two, my higher voice felt much better. Felt good in my body. I felt free. Right? And I believe that is where the shift began in the in between. From moving from shedding that old me like a snake sheds skin and moving into the new skin of the new me. I can only give you those words now. I didn't have them as labels or words while I was in the flow of it. And then we were talking about when discernment begins. Discernment, I believe, discernment begins to help override the egoic self's predisposed plans to doing the same thing continuously each time, expecting a different outcome. That's what I told AI. And AI asked me a question. Can you remember the moment when you felt something deeply, but you didn't follow it? That was a good question. Like I said, I grew up in a time where a lot of information that was given to what little boys and little girls should think about themselves and how they should be. Society and what we were watching on TV and commercials and the toys that were being marketed to us were telling us what little boys should be, what little girls should be. Little girls grew up with baby dolls and Chatty Cathy and Barbie dolls and Barbie and Ken and we played house and we were being primed to be wives and mothers. Little boys were meant to go out and play rough, tough, and tumble, be anything they wanted to be, and eventually be husbands and fathers and leaders of the family. And for a portion of time, 60s, 70s, 80s, this wasn't question. This was just as is. Doesn't mean movement wasn't happening to change, but primarily it was passed down from parent to parent, from parent to child to parent to child. Generational. And of course, if you question it, you always got an answer. This is how it's always been. This is the way it'll always be. Even when I was working in certain departments and they were using things that were outdated and took way too much time to do, I would say, well, we can do X, Y, and Z. It'll be much faster. Why do we do it this way? And you'll have certain people who have worked there for 6 or 7 years, maybe 10 years, or who knows, maybe even 20 years, and they'll say, well, that's the way we've always done it. It just is, right? So to continue the story, for me, marrying my high school sweetheart, having 2 to 3 children, and being a wife and a mother was the path. Even though my mother was trying to convince me, she wanted me to finish at least 4 years of college and then make that decision. But guess what? Even though things were telling me I could have a possibility of a different life, I still wouldn't back down. Even though I knew that there was something in me that knew that there were other possibilities, I didn't back down from that egoic knowledge in me that said, do do this. It's comfortable. You're not stepping outside the box because it's scary outside the box. You don't know what'll happen if you do that part. If you go ahead and finish college and you don't know, it might not work out, but that if you marry your high school sweetheart, you're going to live a happier ever after life. Year year 3, the happier ever after started to fall apart. But my higher self, even then, was trying to tell me that there were other possibilities. Why? Because it opened the door to hearing other people say it. But because I chose to stick with a certain egoic knowledge or unconscious way of doing things, of course there's going to be consequences. In the AI, SoulStar said, what happened when you didn't follow it? Her way of saying, well, what was the consequence? When I didn't follow my inner knowing or my higher being or that other voice, all I can say is life at that point became chaotic. I became a victim of my choices because the other voice was telling me, oh well, we're just stuck here and it's everybody else's fault except you. I still hadn't backed down. All that had happened was the set dressing changed, like in a stage play. The background changed, but the roles stayed the same. Right now, I can see both sides now through discernment, not through judgment, through discernment. Because when somebody says, well, now that you know what you know, if you were to go back, would you change anything? And because I know that I'm supposed to grow and expand through choices, whether they feel good or they don't, I would always say no. I wouldn't trade my children or my grandchildren for anything. That was my path getting there. I made choices. They were uncomfortable. Sometimes it was rugged. Sometimes it was full of judgment, and judgment not only from others, but judgment about myself through my egoic, unconscious self, always wanting to put the blame, woe is me. So, no, I didn't honor my inner voice, my higher inner voice. It didn't disappear. I just wasn't listening to it. It was there. Then there came a time that I remember that I started to trust the inner voice. It was around, oh, I don't know, somewhere around 2003. There was a video that came out called The Secret. My youngest son and his girlfriend at that time, who is now his wife, um, gave me a video called The Secret. And he kept waving it in my face, saying, Mom, this reminds me of that Bible verse that you would always tell us about, because there were Bible verses that my mother shared with me, or maybe even my siblings. I don't know if they remember them, like if they remember it like I remember it, but and one of them was, call those things that be not as though they already are. Right? It was also ask, you know, ask, believe, ask, believe, receive. Right? So when I decided to watch it, it took me about a month because he gave it to me at the beginning of December, and it sat on top of my TV stand. And December came around, and it was time to do the family thing. And they were going to show up, and both my daughter and I said, "Oh, Mom, he's going to ask if we watch it. They're going to ask if we watched it." So we sat down, popped it in the DVD, and we watched it from beginning to end. And then we turned and looked at each other with the biggest eyes and said, "Whoa," because we felt the energy. We both understood it then, right? We both started started to apply the law of manifestation and attraction separately, but we both started to do it. Easy goes. We started out slow, just like they said, but as always, that ego voice is always there going, I don't know about that. This sounds like some pie in the sky shit, right? you know, the ego threw some, doubt in that process. But nonetheless, I started utilizing it, right? I think that was my higher self saying, go ahead, take a chance. And of course, like the video said, I started with cups of coffee. And then I decided to take a leap of faith and go, well, you know what? I always have liked acting as a child. I think I'm going to, try that out. See if, see if I can find an acting class and whatnot. And before you know it, doors were opening because I just said, I'm going to take that leap of faith, right? And after a while, I found a online site that I could go to where I could submit myself for uh, student films and indie films and just little shorts and and whatnot. And I realize now that I was listening to my inner spirit, my inner voice telling me you can do this, especially telling me when my egoic self was telling me, oh well, you work an 8-hour day, you're not going to get very far, and how are you going to uh, uh, really become a movie star, um, because all the real people that are going to become a movie star, they don't work 8 hours. They're busting tables in restaurants and sleeping on people's couches and blah blah blah. And you've got kids. And my higher self was work it out. And I worked for a company that allowed me to shift time when I needed to go on auditions. Matter of fact, some of my colleagues would run lines with me to help me get prepared. The door opened, right? And sometimes, even when things looked like an opportunity, and my higher self said, this doesn't feel right. And I'll give you an example. Sometimes, when you book a gig, there are people that are shady and they're doing films that, that they're not on the up and up with. And the moment that they would say, oh, the audition is going to take place in a warehouse on blah, 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 my higher self would say, opportunity is nice, but the location, we're not feeling good about that. And I would listen to my higher self and go, nope, I'm not feeling good about that. So I would decline it. That's how I know right now that I was trusting my higher self and my inner voice, and while it was trying to keep me safe. Because when you look at, it's kind of just like this. I know a person, and this is a long time ago, that she would only take one way home from work. She didn't want to be on the freeway. And it's not me. I know I don't like driving freeway, but it's not me I'm talking about. It's someone else. And she used to take the canyon roads home. Canyon road was one way in and one way out. Even if there was something blocking the way or an accident, she would be on that particular road, even if she did, it took her 2 hours to get home. Those are her choices. One day, she stepped outside of her box, and she told me about this later. She took a street up the canyon and came back down to where she could make a left and go back the way she came. I mean, the moment that she stepped outside of that box, things opened up, and she made her way to the freeway, to the 101 that let her get off on Highland, and she took the streets in from there. after she got off the freeway. It was just a short little blurb. The freeway was clear, no backup traffic, and she got to her destination. When she came back, she said, "I can't believe that I just did it." I believe now that she took the opportunity to listen to her higher self and trust her higher self in knowing. Now, I'm not saying that that she did or she didn't. I'm thinking that it was an infinite possibility that she stepped outside of her egoic self, telling her, even if you're on this street for 3 hours, you're safe, right? For a moment, she embodied it, right? So then the SoulStar asked me a question. When I was listening to my inner self, my higher self, what did it feel like in my body? And I just said at that time that I was learning the law of attraction and manifestation. I was dealing with a couple of things. I was dealing with a diagnosis in my left breast, and all they kept doing was calling it a calcification. And each time I would go to another doctor, it was another big word. Well, my egoic self, the self that wants to look at everything negatively and in uncertainty, was rampant. But I decided to watch the video again and manifest a better outcome for myself. I'm not saying it was picture perfect, but what I began to feel was control. Not forcing myself to be a certain way, but allowing myself to know that everything is going to be fine. Allowing myself to know that the surgery I had to have, I was going to have a good doctor. And I did. Back then, this is well over 20, 30 years ago. Back in literally between 2003 to 2008, all of this was happening. And when I had the surgery, and I had to have it, normally they do a breast biopsy and they just take a little piece out with a certain tool, but they had to do it surgically for me because my boobs were too small, according to the surgeon. And he had to go in there and he had to navigate, and I had to be asleep for this, so it was surgery. He had to navigate in there to pinpoint the calcification and get a piece of it. Well, the energy of me going into the surgery in a higher, using uh, uh, my higher voice, was everything's going to work out. My surgeon's got this. And literally before I went under the anesthetic, he says, "I got you. No worries." And he smiled, right? And then when I woke up and he came in, he says, "Well, Sandra, I'll just tell you, I just went for it and I took everything out. I took the whole piece out. They can biopsy the whole piece. I just said in my head, why should she have to come back for another surgery? I hope that was okay." The vibration was loud. It was like, oh, this is what it's like This is what, you know, the law of attraction is like. That outcome felt very peaceful, very not hopeful, but very knowingful. I understood. Now, even when I think about it now, I understand it now because I had to go through, most recently, at latter of last year, on my right side. But I knew more about my higher self, about that inner voice, about how powerful it can be. And then SoulStar asked me, do you see patterns now? And at first, I didn't really think about it as patterns. So when I told SoulStar, I said no. Back then, I didn't think of it as patterns. I just thought of it as something that I was learning. But yes, now I do see patterns. Everything I learned back then prepared me for now. It prepared me for last year. Surgery, radiation, healing. Now I know about transmuting and alchemizing energy. Now I can listen deeper to my higher self and trust it. Now I speak differently than I did then. Now I understand that material or manifesting isn't just internal, it's internal that moves externally and actually manifests into whatever my thought is, wherever the thought is coming from my higher self or from my egoic self. It's manifesting, it's moving from me outward. This is what life is. This is what I consider lifing. And then SoulStar said, does this journey end or does it repeat? All I could say was, it completes and then it repeats over and over again. That's evolution. That's continuous expansion. So if you're in the in between, I would suggest don't be afraid of it. It can be scary, but you don't have to fear it. You can just move through the scary part and take one step at a time till it becomes familiar to you. Then SoulStar asked me, what would you tell someone who's in the in between? I would say, it's okay not to know who you are. That's part of why you're here. That's called growth. It's okay not to know who you're becoming. It's called growth. It's called artistry. You get to try. You get to learn. You get to adjust. You get to step outside of the box, even though your egoic unconscious self is tapping into your conscious self saying, nope, hold up, stop. We can't go out that far. You get to course correct. You get to become who you want to be. If it doesn't work out, then you can go, okay, I gotta redirect it. I gotta course correct. Your AI in your location when you're putting directions or the a address in your maps is always course correcting you, especially when you don't listen to the maps and you bypass where you're supposed to turn. Your map course corrects for you and tells you to make a U-turn and go back to the street. Or if you don't make a U-turn, it looks for the next street that you can make a right on and take you a different way to get to your destination. There's not one way to you have to go. There's not one way to grow and expand. There's not one way to become. There are infinite possibilities. There are over 9 billion people in this earth sphere environment, this 3D environment, having a story or becoming, and they're not going to all become in the same fashion. For me, I think that would be very boring if everybody was the same. For me, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. The in between for an individual does not look the same, does not feel the same. The in between from who you are to who you're becoming is filled with opportunity if you choose to see it that way. It can be filled with chaos, and you can be a victim of the chaos if you choose to see it that way. If you choose to listen to the voice that's going to present it to you that way. Right? It's okay to not know who you're growing into until you get to a point where you say, ooh, this doesn't feel right. You get to find out what does and make a different choice. You get to course correct. It's like taking in the department store, you take 3 different sizes of the same dress into the dressing room and try them on. Or for you men, shirt or pants or jeans or caps, t-shirts, whatever, till you find the fit that's right for you. And when you're in the dressing room, that's the in between, because you haven't made that decision yet. You're trying it on for size. And then you wash, rinse, and you repeat. Example, you might wear the t-shirt that you bought and you wore it till you wore it out. It takes you 3 years to wear it out. And then you're back at that store looking for a t-shirt comparable to what you had, or a new version of a jacket or something that's trending for you. And then you take 3 different sizes of that jacket in to see which fit is a good fit for you, because you grew from the t-shirt to wearing a jacket and you know, slacks instead of t-shirts and jeans and tennis shoes. Now you're wearing a jacket, slacks, and slide in loafers, whatever. I don't know. But it's called growth and expansion. Right? That's called evolution. And evolution doesn't stop. Once you got that figured out, you're still going to move in the in between for the next version of you. Wash, rinse, and repeat. But repeat doesn't mean repeat the same pattern as before. It's wash, rinse, and repeat growth. So we're coming on the hour mark, right? 4:57. I'd like to thank you for walking through this space with me. There is so much more that we can talk about the in between spaces that you're in while you're shedding the old you and becoming a new version of you. Here's what I know. I know that when I go to sleep, that old version of me, I shed it. I close that energy exchange of that old version of me. I take on a new energy exchange as I sleep of rest, of restoration, of regeneration, of, of unconditional love, of peace, of harmony. This is all the stuff that I open up energy wise so that when I wake up anew, it's a new version of me in this energy. What it's going to be, what it's going to turn out to be, what it's going to create for me, that's the exciting part because that's growth and expansion. So I thank you for not just being a listener, but being someone who is willing to reflect, to feel, to meet yourself in your own becoming, wherever you're at in your in between. If something in this conversation has resonated with you, I invite you to sit with it. I invite you to allow it to unfold in your own way. If you feel called, share it with someone. Share your experience and how you felt listening to this with someone else who might need to hear this. Then share it in a comment with me. Even if you want to journal it, a long paragraph, I read them. I welcome you in this space of connection. If you would like to continue these conversations with me, subscribe to my YouTube at Soul Awakening with Sandra. Follow me on Facebook at Sandra Marshall. This is where all my episodes and future episodes become reflections for you. Not telling you who to be or how to be, just giving you information of how I did it. Like I said, if you know someone who is moving through their own in-between space, share this with them. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. And know that I will meet you in the flow next week. I wish you unconditional love to you and yours. Be brave today. Enjoy your in-between from who you were to who you're becoming. It's exciting. One love.